Good morning. Well, it's morning here. Welcome back to the Real Wealth Solutions podcast. I am one of your hosts, Greg Scully. Joining me is my partner, Darren Light from down the road here, I think, in Johnson City. I don't know where you are, but I appreciate you joining in. And our guest today is Brain Briscoe of Four Oaks Capital. This is the inaugural episode of our new series, The Road to 500 Units. So I think Brian technically is clocking in at 485. Was that, but we rounded up, snuck him in. We tossed this idea around. It seems like that's kind of a magic number of units. By that time, unless you bought one big project, you probably have a few transactions under your belt, maybe have gone full cycle. And I think just be a useful conversation to talk to some of these people that are a little bit further ahead than us, and take some lessons from their journey that they're willing to share, and see what we can learn. So Brian, welcome. Appreciate your time for kicking this thing off. Can you start us off with the bio and tell us about what you're up to?
Sure. Hey, thanks for having me on, Greg, and thanks, Darren. I appreciate the time you're spending. So yeah, I think if you really want to know who I am, it starts, probably 20 years back. September 11th, I was a college student. I was in a PhD program actually for math, and then the World Trade Center went down. Now, the other part about me is I happened to be a Marine reservist at the time. So, World Trade Center goes down. My reserve unit starts talking about, we're going to war. We're going to war. And the big thing is there was a lot of fuzziness about timelines. We didn't know when. We knew a lot of reserve units were being called up. We knew that the president at the time was deploying forces to the Middle East, to Afghanistan, and later Iraq, and just the whole fuzziness of the timeline bothered me. And it was just one of those things. I joined the Marine Reserves to be on tap in case something like that happened. And so I decided just to take things in my own hands and go active duty. I volunteered for active duty and basically never looked back, so that was, roughly 20 years ago. And I'll retire from the Marine Corps in July of this year. So, that said, I've been around the world, several deployments. I moved every 2 to 3 years. I think my shortest duty station was 9 months, so it's 2 moves in a 12-month period. But along the way, I think I caught this idea of, accumulating real estate. I think I ran into 1 or 2 people who were several years ahead of me that were like, yeah, we bought a house at every duty station we've been at, and now we have 8 or 10 or, something like that. I'm like, that's a good idea. Along the way, and I know we're going to hit mindset later, along the way, I think 2004 timeframe, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Cash Flow Quadrant. And I can remember where I was. So when I read those books, it was on one of my deployments. So it was 2004 that I read those books. And I remember thinking, man, he talks a lot about commercial real estate. I really love commercial. I really love the idea of real estate, but I can't handle commercial. I don't even know where to start. I can't, it's bridged too far is what I thought. So I latched onto the idea of just picking up single family homes. And, every time we moved, we'd do a little analysis, rents versus mortgage prices. And does it make sense to buy something and turn it into a rental, or does it make sense to rent for a couple of years? So, over the last, 20 years, we picked up a handful of single family homes in areas where it made sense. And, I think, the next big point in my life was another deployment. It was early 2017. I was on a Navy ship somewhere like in the Gulf of Aden or the Persian Gulf or something. I don't remember where I was, but I just realized that, I didn't like leaving my family so much. I was always gone, and I was really, frankly, getting sick of the deployment schedule, and I realized that if I didn't come up with an exit plan from the Marine Corps, that I would stay in the Marine Corps. That's just me knowing myself. I'd get to the end of the next 3-year tour, and not have a plan and just say, well, I guess I'll just stay in for another 3, and that's really kind of what brought me up to my 20-year mark. But at that point, I started looking deeply into what I really wanted to do. And it was always real estate. I always had told myself I want to do something real estate related after I get out of the Marine Corps. And this is where I really took it seriously. I kind of hit rock bottom, and quite frankly, compared to a lot of people's rock bottom, it wasn't very bottom, but I realized that I needed to change, or I would keep on doing the same thing, keep on achieving the same results. So started reading books, and I really started reading books about single family. And the one thing I kept on realizing about single family is, if you wanted to build something that was able to, give you a certain return or a certain level of passive income, you had to have a lot of single family homes. I mean, it was going to be, purchase 2, 3, 4 single family homes per year to get me to my goal. And it was still going to take 20 years. And anyway, I didn't like the time frame involved, and the level of work. To buy 40 single family homes, you've got to make 40 offers and 40 closing periods, 40 loans. And so I started looking into multifamily, and that's really, I think, a light went off in my mind. I read a book about small multifamily, and it was just like, wait a sec. If my number, and incidentally, my number was 60 single family homes to, never have to work again. But I realized that I could, with far fewer transactions, get to that number. So I started going all in on the multifamily. At some point realized that I needed help, got into a coaching program, started getting involved in a lot of forums that, Facebook or online forums, whatever format they were. Started going to the local meetups. This is, 2018, 2019, pre-COVID. Started going to a lot of the local meetups, meeting people who were doing it. And then, throwing my line in the water, and seeing what was out there. But long story short, I ended up finding a couple of business partners. Our goals aligned. We get along, fabulously, and, we work together well. So we all came together around one deal. And then after working together on that one deal for several months, decided, let's be exclusive. And that's where Four Oaks came in. It was a very deliberate, we like each other. We think we're going to do better long-term with each other than by ourselves. And, that's basically the genesis of Four Oaks. We've been together for roughly, 2.5 years. It depends on, when you want to start the clock. But in that time frame, we've closed on 8 different apartment communities, total of 485 units. And I think total combined purchase price, I think we're sitting at 22 million.
That's a nice run.
Yeah.
That's
It's only
3
just
years.
begun. It's only just begun. I mean, one of my partners is flying out to Oklahoma City today to look at something that's going to add a nice, it's going to increase our total numbers by a significant amount. Let's put it that way. But we have an LOI signed. I'm not going to talk too much about it so we don't jinx ourselves. But it's going to be about a $13 million purchase price, 300 plus units.
All right.
It's a great market.
Yeah.
Great market.
Yeah, it's a common story. The single family thing. I mean, that's how I got started. We only got to 2.
Mm-hmm.
And we were doing turnkey stuff out of Memphis, and quickly realized, especially after that first vacancy, chewed up basically the equivalent of a full year's cash flow, that this was probably not going to be the vehicle that was going to work. And I was kind of at the same number. It was around 50 some odd homes. I'm like, there's got to be a different way.
Yeah.
And then, the multifamily kind of reveals itself a little bit. What's that?
8 transactions. So in those 8 transactions, have you found, that's about double what we've done currently. Have you found any one area of the process that sort of has become the bottleneck, or something that you have improved or can improve moving forward?
The bottleneck has always been lending. It's always
True.
been the lender, so if the lender is fast, the transaction is fast. If the lender is slow, the transaction is slow. We had one property that we were in escrow for 8 months, and it was a loan assumption, and we waited a long time for the lender just to start. It's like, hey, here's our application, would you please start? And we would get an email from them saying, hey, we're looking at 3 to 4 weeks until we're able to close. And 2 to 3 weeks later, we check in with them, and we're like, hey guys, how's it looking? Oh, I think in about 3 to 4 weeks we'll be able to close. Well, that's what you said 3 weeks ago. And they strung us along for a while, and then COVID hit, and it ended up being a marathon closing. Our first couple of deals, I think the lending markets have been, extremely busy because of the low interest rates. You got a lot of people buying, you got a lot of people refinancing to take advantage of it. But same thing on our first purchase. We were told, 45 to 60 days from loan application until approval. And, we looked at our contract timeline and said, okay, we're going to put this application in 60 days before we want to close. And we have a 30-day extension that we can, tack on to the end. We ended up having to tack on that 30-day extension, waiting for the lender, and purchase another extension, so it was over 90 days to close on a loan. And I don't know, we did everything we could. Every time they'd ask for information, we'd turn around in 24 hours and have it to them. But we have learned to work the process better. I mean, the lenders are typically asking for the exact same things every time. So now we have all those documents on file. We have the personal financial statements for everybody on file. So when they come out and they ask you for a PFS, you're not like, oh, shoot, I guess I got to figure this out. We are essentially sending them all those documents, or we have all those documents ready to go, when we send the loan application in. So, we've learned to streamline it a little bit, but, every bank, every loan program is going to ask for slightly different things. If you're doing a recourse loan, they might ask for tax returns too. But, it's just a matter of, after having done it 8 times, we know what they're going to ask for. We know what to expect. And, we're making sure that we're well qualified before the application goes in.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that those lending delays can lead to some very sticky situations, potentially with the seller, and extensions and things like that, because we experienced, a similar situation. So now we got much more intentional about building in extensions to the PSA to begin with. So, at least that first one out of the gate, you don't have to go and ask for, and it's predetermined of whatever cost it might be, if there is going to be one. But then after that, you have to go back to the table and hope that you have a cooperative seller.
Yeah. And the first one, I mean, we got tagged a little bit by the seller. I mean, he knew he had us. We had we had 6 figures on the line. We had almost $200,000 on the line by this time, between all the money that we've put out, and we needed an extra 3 days. All we needed was 3 days. We asked for a week, and it ended up costing us $20,000 that wasn't applied towards the purchase price. So it essentially raised the price of the building by $20K. So yeah, in that case, the lender just dragging their feet and being super slow ended up biting us.
Yeah, and there's little you can do about that.
Yeah, it's
unfortunately
pay an extra $20K or lose 200. It's just like, I guess we'll pay an extra 20.
I think the only other thing that we've learned, which Greg excels at, or has learned to excel at and has taken on the role, is, besides having your documents ready at the push of a button, with everything within your capability, you have to drive the lender yourself. And just be on them like a nuisance. And then you hope that you can create a relationship with one to where the more you do business with them, the better it gets. But yet I think we've had a different lender for each deal we've done to date, based on the area, what one's willing to give versus the other, et cetera.
Yeah, out of the 8 properties, we have 3 loans with 1 local bank. and then we have a credit union that's, down the street too. So, that one local bank, that they've actually been the fastest on every single transaction. So that one local bank, we can keep on going back. And actually, let me go back on that statement. There was one transaction, they were slow, but they were a small bank that got bought out by a larger bank, and they were in a transition phase, while we were applying for a loan. But it ended up being a little longer than we had expected, but they ended up closing fairly quickly. So instead of we still had to, pay for the extension, but I think we were only like 8 or 10 days into the extension before we closed. But yeah, by far the longest pole in the tent has been lending for us.
All right, cool. Let's talk about just like the structure of your partnerships. On the Four Oaks page, there's 6 of you listed as the team. I imagine it didn't start with 6, and before we started recording,
yep,
Brian and I were talking. We came from a common educational platform, and you had mentioned that underwriting is not something that is your role in your partnership now, at least.
Yep.
So can you talk about how your partnerships started, what your roles were, and then what team member you decided to add next, and maybe why, just how that growth happened?
Yeah. So it started out, now depending on, like I said, where you want to start the button. I think Four Oaks started, or the idea of Four Oaks started individually. Eric and Brian Mallon had partnered together. They were looking for apartment deals together. So they were partnered together. And then I met Eric in the same forum that we were involved with. We realized that we were basically talking to the same brokers, looking at the same deals, and I had a couple of calls with Eric, just talking to him about general stuff. And when we realized that we were competing on things, Eric suggested that we collaborate, so we started with a very small circle on the map. Anything inside this circle, inside this price point, we will collaborate on, and my deal criteria was more narrow than Eric's was. I think I was looking for things from, $1.5 million to 4 million, and Eric's was looking for things up to 8 million or something. I don't remember the numbers, but we basically came up with a criteria saying, if it fits inside this box, we are going to collaborate. And eventually that box just got a little bigger and a little bigger. And eventually we found something that worked. But, when you're a bunch of guys hustling to find, your first deal, everybody's an underwriter. Everybody's looking for that first deal, and everybody's looking for money. So I was talking with brokers looking for deals. Eric was talking with brokers looking for deals. As far as our strengths, we're both very analytical. We're both good at numbers. My 2 degrees, bachelor's and master's, are in math. So, I can do that part very well. And it turned out that I was the one that found the first deal, so, and what we agreed is, whoever got the first deal under contract, would essentially be the lead for that deal. Now, incidentally, at the time, this was not Four Oaks Capital still. At the time, this was still, 3 guys working together. And we got this deal under contract. We looked at what we needed to do to get it across the finish line. And we figured we could use some more help. And, Eric said, "Hey, I know a guy that might be interested." And he brought Todd Butler in, introduced me to Todd Butler. And essentially we came together around one deal. It was a $4 million purchase price, 55 units in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And it was that one deal that brought us together. So we started hustling on that deal. In this case, I was the lead, and, everyone else played supporting roles, so looking back at it, was it the smartest thing in the world to make me the lead? Probably not, because I live in DC and the property's in Spartanburg. Eric and Todd are both in the Carolinas, so it's one of those where they were a lot closer. So end of the day, that's how we started out. And, we got those, finally closed. Before we closed, a couple months before we closed is when we decided to start Four Oaks. But so, yeah, we were probably 2 months into the process. decided that Four Oaks was going to be a thing, decided to be exclusive. And on the first deal, we actually sat down and very painfully went over, what percent of the GP is each person going to get, and because I was the lead dog, I had the higher percentage. I think I was sitting with like 35-40% of the GP, and my three partners were all somewhere around 20. But once we decided to do Four Oaks, we just decided 25% across the board. And then they assured me, hey, this doesn't, the first deal doesn't count. We're still at our percentages. But after working with them for a couple months, I'm like, hey, look, and this is right before we closed the first deal. I'm like, hey guys, let's just go back to 25 across the board. Let's just make it easy. Everything will be, divided 4 ways equally. So that's really how we started out. We had our second deal under contract before the first one closed, and, we started hustling on that one. And it was really Eric and I that were tag teaming the underwriting. We were tag teaming everything. And, he'd look something over, he'd send me the spreadsheet, I'd look it over, and we'd agree on a price, I'd write the LOI out. And it really kind of muddied the waters having, both of our hands in it in a lot of ways. And at one point, Eric and I just had a conversation about it. He's like, hey, look, it's probably better for me to be the acquisitions guy. Which, sounded like nails on a chalkboard when he said it, because that's kind of the role I always envisioned myself taking. And it's quite frankly an exciting role. It's something that's fun. There's a little bit of excitement involved with putting LOIs in and, getting answers back and negotiating. But he made a very strong argument. He's like, look, I live in the Carolinas. I'm in North Carolina. I travel all the time to Greenville because of my day job. And he was a medical device salesman. I'm active duty Marine, which means I have to, ask pretty please 2 weeks in advance to take time off. So because of his proximity and his time, he ended up taking on the acquisitions role, and at first it was still, him send me everything. It was like, hey, I'm looking at this deal. I think it pencils. What do you think? And over time, it got to the point to where he ended up being a much stronger at analyzing, just because of the amount of stuff that crossed his desk than I did. And it went to the point to where, right now, he basically tells me when we're about to send an LOI in, and that's one of the company agreements is that's something that all 4 of us have to agree on is making offers on properties. So yeah, over the last year and a half, it's gone from, me reviewing everything he does to him giving me a phone call saying, hey, we're putting an LOI out on this property. And usually, by the time he says that, we've been on enough calls where I've heard enough about that property or the metro where I knew he was working on something there. But so that's where we're at right now as far as that goes. So as far as the analysis portion, I'll really start opening spreadsheets, once the LOI is accepted. Once the LOI is accepted, then I'll start looking at the numbers, then I'll start looking at the metros. But up until then, I trust him implicitly with what he does.
Well, then I would imagine at the same time having him take on that role more exclusively, he's released from a role that you're doing more exclusively. So, and that's what I think is important about partnerships. It allows people to focus on not only what they're good at, but in your case, it sounded like what also just made sense for the team for that particular role, regarding the park's proximity and things like that. So it's kind of the divide and conquer type of, like Darren and I moved down here, a year ago. We're a couple hours apart, both in Eastern Tennessee, but now we have 2 people that are boots in the ground in 2 different locales that we're interested in. So, it allows us to do more quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was really the nexus of it. And that's why I agreed. I think if circumstances were a little different, I would have, held on tooth and nail to try to retain that role. But, I realized that my limitations were time and distance. it's an 8-hour drive, realistically, it's close enough that I can get a direct flight. I can leave at 6 a.m. and be home at 6 p.m. and have 5 or 6 hours down in that area. But end of the day, he was traveling to Greenville a couple times a month. He was traveling to Columbia. He was traveling to Greensboro, Winston-Salem a couple times a month, doing his medical device sales job, and he was leveraging his travel to be able to look at real estate. So if he had a call with it or a visit with a physician in Greenville, he'd set up an appointment with a broker and go walk a property. So it just completely made sense. So yeah, I relinquished that, and Eric's been amazing in that role, and that's basically that's how we're going to keep it going forward.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. Able to leverage your W-2. Yeah. He's going to be doing this anyway.
Yeah.
Now he's turning it into also a fishing expedition for Four Oaks at the same time.
Yeah.
What's up, Darren? I'm sorry.
I just wanted to ask if Brian's role is more now of the deal finder, however that's working out.
So my role right now, we're very strong on the education. So when we bring in investors, so we have a couple of different prongs or different approaches in our business, but we have an educational arm, and that is mostly my role, is to develop that educational arm. So we want to create a community similar to the one that Greg and I met in, where people can come, they can network with other interested people, and they can learn about the business. So the podcast that we run is part of that. Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast, we bring an experienced guest and an aspiring apartment investor on every episode. And it's part of that educational process. So, my role has really been around attracting the aspiring investor to be a future member of this community, and getting a lot of, potential partners or experienced investors who can also form part of the community. So, what I'm doing on a daily basis is I'm developing coursework, I'm writing blogs, I'm doing podcasts, I'm getting on calls with a lot of people who could be potential partners with us. And, so since we started the podcast, and since I started the social media outreach, the number of investors that have come through that funnel are increasing, drastically deal by deal. So, the focus is the education, but the education is what's bringing in, a lot of our investors.
Hey, it's Greg from Real Wealth Solutions. If you'd like to know more about our passive income opportunities, jump onto realwealth.solutions and hit that schedule a call button. We're always happy to talk about our multifamily and flip projects and to answer any questions you may have. Again, that's realwealth.solutions. We look forward to hearing from you. And now, back to the podcast.
I'm fortunate to coach for another platform currently, and I'll ask you this question. We'll start getting into mindset. So you are, while you are providing that education and sort of finding out how different people like to invest, whether they're going to lead an entire effort in taking a deal down and or just being a passive investor, they sort of have to learn that along the way. Do you find yourself also in the role of you're the motivator, you're the person inspiring them to, get past their limited beliefs that some people have, and they come into this or anything for that matter?
It's something that's important. I talk about the limiting beliefs a lot. A lot of times, people will set up calls with me and they'll just ask, hey, what do you think I should do? Or, hey, I'm thinking of buying a fourplex. Usually what I do is, I'll just stop on their plans. I'll just say, hey, plans are great. What are your goals? What are your objectives? And I like to start with the end in mind, because, if somebody has an objective to, have a 1,000 or 2,000 unit portfolio, four unit property is not the way to start. So I think what I do a lot of times is, switch things around. Okay, those are your plans. What are your objectives? Is that plan going to get you to your goals? And a lot of times in that conversation, we do find that there's limiting beliefs like, well, I'm doing a 4-unit because I don't think I can do anything bigger. Well, that's a limiting belief. And it was a limiting belief that I had, 3 or 4 years ago. I was looking at 4 units and 6 units myself until I kind of broke through that glass ceiling, so to speak, and realized that I could do bigger things. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of what I do focuses around, mindset, limiting beliefs, and, how to create a growth-minded mindset as well. And most of it's just, get around other people. You got to realize that other people are imperfect. Wrote a blog article 2 weeks ago that basically said that everybody at one point starts out as a beginner. So don't look at that, guy or gal with, 2,000 units under their belt and say, oh my gosh, I can't get there. Instead, look at that person with 2,000 units under their belt as, they entered this world naked and crying just like I did. Yeah. I can do it. So
I love that thought. You've been at this since 2004, basically. You constantly find yourself reminding those new students, hey, this is a long game. I think that's one of the things that some people struggle with. They think they can do this overnight.
It's a get rich slow. I mean, it really is. It's not get rich quick. It's a get rich slow. And, 2004 is when I decided to do it. I lived overseas at the time, and 2007 is when I actually made my first purchase. So, even then from the decision that I made where I'm going to build a real estate empire to when I first pulled the trigger, it still took 3 years. And that was just a single family house.
Right.
And then from single family to first multifamily, there's another dozen years there, so for me, it was slow. And I think, my goal with other people is to help them accelerate. Instead of taking, 2004, it took us 2004 when I first said, wow, that commercial real estate thing sounds way too complicated. After reading, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, to when we closed on our first deal, it was 15 years. It took me 15 years to break through that mental hurdle and get to the point to where I believed that I could do it. And once I started believing that I could do it, the rest came easy, relatively.
Yeah. As easy as this can be. I mean, was there any adjustments that you made along the way, either personally or with Four Oaks, in even like the acquisitions process that had the biggest payoffs? Maybe they were unexpected things that you're like, oh, now that we've done this, wow, 8 months ago when we first thought about it, we should have had it done within 2 weeks.
Oh yeah. So number one, we already mentioned this, the loan application, so on our first property, we looked at our timeline and the lender was telling us 60 days. We had 90 days under contract. We waited 30 days to put that loan application in, so yeah, we are doing the loan application, within the first week. Usually we'll wait until we do our physical walkthrough for due diligence. And we try to do that in the first week. So we'll do our physical walkthrough. We'll make sure that there's nothing glaringly wrong with the property that we didn't know about. Because loan application, we're usually spending about $10,000 with a loan application. It pays for the surveys they have to do. It pays for the appraisal. It pays for lender legal and everything else. But yeah, $10,000 out the door is usually coming out within the first 10 days. So that's one thing. And then just having a sense of urgency about it. The very first property, we thought we had a long time. It's like, oh, we got 90 days. That's money.
Yeah, it goes by so fast.
Yeah, and we didn't have that sense of urgency. And the next lesson I would say is just our CapEx budget. We our first couple of properties, we did the best we could, but our CapEx budget wasn't very well thought out. We relied on a lot of, back of the napkin estimates on what things would cost, so you were talking to a property manager and they're like, yeah, the repairs you're doing are going to be about, $9,000 a unit. And so we threw that $9,000 a unit in, and turns out that 9,000 didn't buy as much as we thought it would, because we were going with the back of the napkin estimate. So we do a lot better at getting some contractors in. They're coming in with tape measures and measuring, instead of eyeballing, and we're getting better. We're getting better numbers for CapEx, and we're doing this during due diligence. We're sharpening our pencil at every level. Once we get it under LOI, we're still sharpening our pencil and finding out more things. During the due diligence process, like I said, we're getting the contractors in to look at things. They're giving us estimates, and we're sharpening our pencil even more. And we're revising that CapEx budget. So I think that's the other big lesson learned is, now we've had a couple of properties that we've owned for 2 years, and we know a lot better what the expenses are going to look like on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, and unfortunately, that's only something that can come from experience. It does get a lot easier to do budgets and estimate rehab. And I noticed nearly all of your stuff is in South Carolina with the outlier in Georgia. So you're just getting constant feedback on the actual cost of things.
Yep.
And it does get a lot easier. And we've learned that lesson well, is, just keep throwing money at the budget.
Yeah.
Because on day one, it's nice to have it there. You can always give it back. It's a lot harder to go back and try and ask for something. Yep. And I was looking, on your website, it looks like you're venturing out into other states. And I mentioned everything is in South Carolina for the most part now. Is moving to other markets a function of you want to diversify out of South Carolina, or you feel like it's harder to reach your investment goals in that market? Or did you find another valuable potential member in these other markets that
It's a good question. We always had a mind for growth. We always knew that eventually we would be outside. I think we have a competitive advantage in the Carolinas. I don't live in the Carolinas, but my wife was born and raised in Columbia, so we have a ton of family there. We're actually going down next month to spend, a week at a timeshare that's been in her family for 40 years, so collectively we have a competitive advantage in the Carolinas because Todd was born in North Carolina and he currently lives in South Carolina. Eric was born and raised in South Carolina and he currently lives in North Carolina, right? So just because of proximity, because we know the areas, we're familiar with the areas, we have that competitive advantage, and that's why we decided to start there. But ever since the beginning, we realized that once we start growing, once we have a track record, it'll be easier to get into other markets. When you're boots on the ground, you have that competitive advantage. I think you should start close to home. But now that we have 500 units under our belt, we've been able to demonstrate the ability to raise capital. We've raised 10 million over the last 2.5 years. So now when we go shopping in other metros, we're still hot on the Southeast, but as we start looking at other metros and expanding, we were able to take that reputation to the other metros. And I mean, incidentally, I'll be moving to Idaho, later this year, because that's where my wife's family is. Her family since moved from the Carolinas to Idaho. So that's where we'll be. And that's possibly going to open up a lot of other markets where, we have a competitive advantage. I'll be 3 hours from Boise, 3 hours from Salt Lake, and, a 6-hour drive from, Denver, Colorado Springs. So, I think in the future, we're going to be less constrained by geography like we are now. And, we're not afraid to hop on a plane, go spend a couple of days in a market, and invest that time and that money in making connections and trying to push the ball further down the court.
It's amazing what a couple of years and a handful of deals under your belt will do for your confidence in being able to go do that there. And Greg and I have that opportunity currently and are doing that. And it's just very, at some point you have to tell yourself, yeah, I know what I'm doing. We know
Mhm.
what we're doing. We're good
Yeah.
at this. And you're able to go to those other markets and or help other people in other markets take stuff down. So
Yeah.
that's very gratifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and the knowledge does transfer. A lot of the knowledge that you gain in one market will transfer to another. I think that's what you did, leveraging intimate market knowledge to grow and build the credibility and the resume to a nice size.
Mhm.
When you go to another market, you're like, here's who we are, check us
Yeah.
out. Here's our
Yeah.
social media platform. Here's how you give back to the community. You know, you're not going in as a tire kicker anymore. You're going in as a proven
Yeah. And
business.
the first conversation with the brokers is going to be entirely different. Instead of,
Correct.
hey, my name's Brian and I'm looking for my first deal, it's we're looking to expand in this market. You know, we have a track record, we have credibility. Now, incidentally, I mean, most of our marketing efforts towards our passive investors has been based around the Southeast, but you know, a lot of the dynamics that are happening in the Southeast are also happening in places like Salt Lake City
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
and Boise,
I was
because
going to say Boise. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
Boise's
mean,
hot.
you know, you look at what's happening on the East Coast and money is moving from north to south. It's coming from the New Yorks, the Bostons, the Connecticuts, and it's moving south towards, you know, the Carolinas and Florida and Georgia as well. On the east, on the West Coast, it's money moving from California inward. You know, basically money's going from high cost of living, high tax areas to low cost of living, low tax areas.
Mhm.
And so the narrative's not going to change too much. It's kind of like, it's just going to be, you know, hey, you know, remember all those great things we said about the Southeast? It's also applies to this area. So I you know, and just to slightly switch gears and hit the same subject from a different angle, I honestly think that, you know, capital attracts deals. You know, I think a lot of people trying to get in the game use the phrase and they misuse the phrase, you know, if you build it, they will come. You know, if you have the money, the deal, the money will come. I think that's absolutely wrong and the opposite of the truth. If you have the capital, the deals will come, you know, and we have the ability to get the capital. And the conversation with the broker now is going to be different. It's going to be, we've raised $10 million in the last couple of years. This next deal we're doing is a $5 million raise. So, you know, I think by the time I sit down with a broker in Salt Lake or Boise, you know, we'll have $15 million raised under our belts. And, you know, that's going to speak volumes. You know, instead of I'm looking for my first deal, I think I might probably be able to potentially raise somewhere around $500,000. So here's my price range. We just finished a $5 million raise and we can do it again. You know, and that's gonna put us at the top of the list on most brokers.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. So what's the next big thing for you guys? Is it vertically integrated, take management in-house if you're using third party now? Is it you know, key strategic relationships with other sponsors in these new markets? Is it just higher unit counts? I mean, what's kind of on your radar for maybe this is like the next level up, you know, because we see it, you know, it's like we've been talking about, it seems like we plateaued a little bit. We need to we need to up our game to this level.
God, this is a fun question because what's next for us? You know, I could talk a whole hour about this one thing, but we've got a lot of things going on. I mean, higher unit counts is in the future. I mean, we still want to close on 3 to 4 deals a year, you know, but instead of, you know, if you look at what we have right now, 8 properties, 485 units, our average property size is 60. Okay. But if you look at what's in the future, we want to start closing on, you know, 4 to 5 deals per year that are around 200 units each, you know, so 1,000 units a year right now is what we think we can handle. We've also brought online a service that we call a cash flow concierge, you know, so there's a couple of people who've signed up for this service. And basically what it is, you know, somebody who has money, but either doesn't have the time or the expertise, and they want to own something all by themselves. You know, so we've closed on 2 deals through this cash flow concierge service. You know, one was a 40 unit with a $2.1 million price tag. And one of them was a 28 unit with $1 million price tag, you know, so we bring in 1 or 2 investors and I mean, they're basically telling us what their criteria is for returns. And as far as structure, we basically individually sit down with each investor and say, how involved do you want to be? We can go from, we find the deal, we underwrite the deal, we close the deal, and we hand it over to you 100%, or, we'll manage it for you. So that's one of the things that we've brought on, and, I like it. The philosophy is we're looking at, dozens of deals a week. Some of them don't meet our criteria, but if it meets somebody else's criteria, we might as well. And, one of the faces on the website is, we're talking with her right now about being a full-time employee with us to run that program. And then the other thing on there is, like I said, the educational community that we're building. It will eventually turn into a coaching program. I don't know how far away we are from that. It's going to at least be after I retire. But that's, my focus of effort. And eventually vertical integration is the goal. We've already hired a CFO, Deb Pritchard. She's absolutely amazing. That's another face on the website. And we're looking at bringing in a new partner who can help us scale. And that's really the next thing. Super excited for it. We've come to terms, and, we'll have a new, a huge announcement on a new partnership. But, it's somebody who's taken businesses from startup to multi, has he done unicorns? I don't know what his biggest business is, but it's definitely larger than what we've done. But, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue is what he's been able to pour through his businesses. And we're bringing him on as a partner to help us scale and to help us, raise capital and to reach the next level. So, and part of that is going to definitely be the vertical integration. We will likely in the next year hire an asset manager first that works for us, that's managing the assets. And then once we hit the tipping point, we'll probably bring property management in-house as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah. The cash flow concierge, that's such an interesting idea, because we hear it all the time. It's like, why are these deals overpriced? These numbers don't work. Well, they don't work for me, and they don't work for our returns objectives for our style of syndication. But to your point, it might work very well for somebody else with a completely different set of expectations. And so you can being able to recognize that and maybe help somebody out.
And that
doesn't have to go to the trash can. It can go to another level of your network. That's a great idea.
And that's part of the reason I think a lot of people look at deals and think they're overpriced, is they're trying to get them to hit, 16, 18, 20% returns, and some of these deals are, maybe a 10 to 12% IRR, which, doesn't meet everybody's criteria, but it meets some people's criteria.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So if you have somebody who says, hey, I'm happy with a 12%, average annual return over a 5-year hold, or I'm happy with, a 6 to 8% cash on cash, and, buy and hold this thing forever. There's a lot more open doors when it comes to what deals actually work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, right on. We're coming up on your time constraint here. Can you let us know, how do we get a hold of you if we're interested in, Blue Oak sounds like these guys definitely got their act together. How do I get in touch with you?
Yeah, it's 4 Oaks. Blue Oaks is actually a different
that's
group.
Another group.
Yeah. So they're
I'm
also.
glad I wasn't the one that did that.
Plug for Cody and Brian there.
Yeah. I know those guys, but 4 Oaks Capital is the website. Anybody who's interested in investing, go to our 4 Oaks Capital website. We have a lot of free educational materials on there. And you can schedule a call with one of us, just, a couple clicks of a button. Directly to me, Brain Briscoe at 4oakscapital.com. Pretty simple. That's my email address. Let me know where you heard me. And, we also have, Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast, and that's at diaryofanApartmentinvestor.com. So if you just want to listen to what we have to say and the content we put out, podcast is an easy way to start.
Yeah, and you're pretty active on LinkedIn. I think that's how we kind of caught up again.
Yep.
You host some Zoom meetups.
Yep. Yeah, we do a weekly Friday meetup as well. And we also do a monthly, third Monday of every month, so lots of stuff going on. If anybody's interested in any of that, drop me a line, LinkedIn, great place to get a hold of me, or just send me an email.
Right on.
Awesome. And I just want to say personally, thank you for your service, Brian, in the Marines, and just your story in general, and your stick-to-itiveness, if you will. That's huge for people getting into this business. So appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So there you have it. Our first episode of the Road to 500. Appreciate your insights. It's not an impossible task. It's not linear though either.
No.
There's lots of movement along the way. So appreciate you sharing your stories. We'll drop all your contact information into the show notes as usual. And if you're growing, you got a partner that's growing, you think they would benefit from hearing Brian's journey along the way, we appreciate you sharing this episode with them. And of course, subscribing and reviews are always welcome. So until next time, I am Greg, and Darren, you want to take us out?
Hey, thanks everybody. We really appreciate you joining us for this episode with Brain Briscoe and Four Oaks Capital, and we look forward to the next one. Have a great day.
Right on. Thank you.
Done.